Your best friend just posted photos from Bali. Last month it was the Maldives. Before that, a rooftop dinner in Dubai with champagne towers and sunset views that made your heart ache with envy. You double tap, you smile. You feel that familiar twist in your stomach, that quiet voice asking why your life looks so small compared to theirs. But here's what they didn't post. Here's what never makes it to the grid. 3 days after that Bali photo, your friend was sitting in their car in a Target parking lot, crying because their credit card got declined buying groceries. The champagne dinner in Dubai? $1,200 on a card that was already maxed. The Maldives? A trip they'll be paying off for the next 3 years, assuming they can make the minimum payments. This isn't a story about your friend being irresponsible. This is a story about a trap so perfectly designed, so elegantly constructed, that the people caught inside it don't even realize they're bleeding. And the blood? It's not red, it's green. Let me take you back to a moment in American history that nobody talks about anymore, because if they did, you'd start asking uncomfortable questions. The year was 1938. The United States was crawling out of the Great Depression, but barely. Families were still living on the edge. Men who once wore suits to work were standing in bread lines. The entire country had learned, the hard way, what happens when you borrow money you can't pay back. Banks had collapsed. Fortunes evaporated. People jumped out of windows. The cultural memory was seared into the American soul. Debt was shameful. Debt was dangerous. Debt was what destroyed your neighbor, your brother, your father. If you couldn't pay cash, you didn't buy it. Period. This wasn't some quaint, old-fashioned value. This was survival wisdom written in blood. But there was a problem. A problem for the people who owned the factories, the assembly lines, the means of production. Americans weren't buying enough. They were too cautious, too traumatized. They saved their money. They fixed their old clothes. They made things last. And when people stop buying, the machine stops moving. Profits shrink. Shareholders get nervous. The entire engine of capitalism starts to sputter and stall. Something had to change. Not the system itself, understand. The system was fine. What needed to change was you. What needed to change was the way human beings thought about money, about worth, about what it meant to live a good life. Enter a man named Edward Bernays. You probably don't know his name. But you live inside the world he built. Bernays was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he understood something that most people in 1938 didn't. He understood that human beings don't make rational decisions. We make emotional decisions and then justify them with logic afterward. Bernays had already proven this in the 1920s when he convinced American women to start smoking cigarettes by rebranding them as torches of freedom. He didn't sell cigarettes. He sold identity. He sold rebellion. He sold the feeling of being modern and liberated. The cigarettes were just the vehicle. Now, in the aftermath of the Depression, Bernays and men like him were hired by American corporations to solve their buying problem. And they didn't solve it by making better products or lowering prices. They solved it by changing the way Americans thought about themselves. Before Bernays, you bought things because you needed them. After Bernays, you bought things because of who you wanted to be. This was the birth of consumer identity. The idea that the objects you own, the brands you wear, the car you drive, the watch on your wrist, aren't just tools or possessions. They're statements. They're proof. They're the answer to the question nobody asks out loud, but everyone is asking silently. Who am I? Am I worth something? Do I matter? Bernays understood that if you could link products to identity, to status, to the feeling of being seen and valued, you could make people buy things they didn't need with money they didn't have. You just had to make them feel like they weren't buying a product. They were buying a better version of themselves. But there was still one obstacle: that Depression-era fear of debt, that cultural immune system that said borrowing money was dangerous and shameful. Americans had been trained by catastrophe to avoid debt like poison, so the system needed a new kind of product, something that didn't feel like debt, something that felt like freedom. In 1950, a man named Frank McNamara was having dinner at a restaurant in New York City called Major's Cabin Grill. When the check came, he reached for his wallet and realized he'd left it in another suit. He had to call his wife to bring him cash. The humiliation of that moment, that small social embarrassment, gave him an idea. What if you could pay for dinner without cash? What if you could just sign your name and settle up later? He launched the Diners Club card. It wasn't marketed as debt. It was marketed as sophistication, as convenience, as the kind of thing a successful person would carry. Within a year, thousands of people had one. Within a decade, the credit card industry was born. But here's where it gets dark. Here's where the trap starts to close. The early credit cards required you to pay off your balance every month. They were charge cards, not credit cards. You couldn't carry a balance. You couldn't roll debt forward into infinity. That changed in the 1970s. Banks realized they were leaving money on the table. Why let people pay off their balance when you could charge them interest? Why settle for transaction fees when you could create a system where people owed you money forever? And so the modern credit card was born. The one that lets you make minimum payments. The one that charges you 18% interest, or 24%, or higher. The one that's designed, mathematically and psychologically, to keep you in debt for as long as possible. The marketing was brilliant. They didn't say go into debt. They said buy now, pay later. They didn't say owe us money forever. They said enjoy life today. They hired psychologists and behavioral scientists to study exactly how much credit to extend, exactly when to raise your limit, exactly how to make the minimum payment feel manageable, even as the total balance grew and grew. They turned debt into a lifestyle. And then they did something even more insidious. They made it invisible. Think about how money used to work. You had cash in your wallet. You could see it. You could count it. You handed it over and it was gone. There was a physical, tangible loss. Your brain registered it. You felt it. But credit cards abstracted that pain away. Now you just tap a piece of plastic or wave your phone. There's no physical loss. No visual cue that you just spent money. Studies show that people spend 30 to 50% more when they use credit cards instead of cash. And it's not because they're irrational. It's because the pain of payment has been anesthetized. You're spending money, but your brain doesn't process it the same way. It's like drinking alcohol that doesn't taste like alcohol. You don't realize how much you've consumed until you try to stand up and the room is spinning. By the 2000s, the credit card companies had perfected the system. They targeted college students, knowing that people who get a credit card in their late teens or early 20s will likely carry debt for decades. They designed rewards programs that made you feel smart for spending money. They created tiers and status levels, turning credit limits into a measure of social worth. If your credit limit was $5,000, you were ordinary. If it was $50,000, you were elite. They gamified debt, and it worked. By 2008, the average American household carried over $8,000 in credit card debt. Today, it's higher, much higher. But credit cards were just the beginning. The real trap, the one that's caught your friends, the one that's probably caught you, is much more sophisticated than a piece of plastic. It's the entire culture of performative wealth. It's the Instagram economy. It's the idea that your value as a human being is determined by how your life looks to other people. Social media didn't create this. Bernays created it in the 1930s, but social media turned it into a weapon. Before Instagram, before Facebook, before TikTok, you compared yourself to your neighbors, maybe to celebrities in magazines. The comparison set was limited. You knew the guy next door probably couldn't actually afford that new car. You saw him leave for work every morning in his wrinkled shirt. You knew the reality behind the facade. But social media removed that context. Now you're comparing yourself to everyone, everywhere, all the time. You're comparing your boring Tuesday afternoon to someone else's highlight reel. You're comparing your real life to their edited, filtered, carefully curated fiction, and your brain doesn't know the difference. Here's what happens. You see your friends' vacation photos. Your brain releases a tiny hit of cortisol, the stress hormone. You feel inadequate. You feel left behind. That feeling sits in your chest like a stone. Then you see an ad. Maybe it's for a flight deal. Maybe it's for a new outfit. Maybe it's for a gadget or a subscription service or a meal kit. And the ad promises you something. It promises you that if you buy this thing, you'll feel better. You'll be the person in the vacation photo. You'll be worthy of envy instead of feeling it. So you buy. You tap. You enter your credit card information. For a moment, a brief, shining moment, you feel good. You feel like you're taking control. Like you're investing in yourself. Like you're closing the gap between who you are and who you want to be. But the feeling doesn't last. It can't last. Because the product isn't what you actually want. What you want is to feel valued. What you want is to feel secure. What you want is to stop feeling like you're losing some invisible race, and you can't buy that. So the feeling fades, usually within hours, and you're left with the product and the debt. And the cycle starts again. You see another post. You feel that same inadequacy. You buy something else. The debt grows. The stress increases. And perversely, the stress makes you more likely to spend, because spending is the only tool you've been given to manage the feeling of falling behind. The credit card companies know this. The social media platforms know this. They've spent billions of dollars studying your behavior, tracking your clicks, measuring your engagement, optimizing the system to keep you scrolling and buying and borrowing. They know exactly how much credit to give you. Enough that you feel powerful, but not so much that you pay it off. They know exactly when to send you a promotional offer. Right after you've had a bad day, right after you've seen something that made you feel small. They know that if they can keep you in debt, they own a piece of your future. Every month, when you make that minimum payment, you're sending them money. Not for something you still have. Not for something that's still bringing you value. For something you bought months or years ago, something that's probably broken or forgotten or stuffed in a closet. You're paying interest on a ghost. And here's the cruelest part. The more debt you carry, the more you need to maintain the illusion. Because if people found out, if your friends and family and followers knew that you were drowning, that would be the ultimate humiliation. So you keep posting. You keep performing. You keep pretending that everything is fine, that you're thriving, that your life is a series of perfect moments, and everyone who sees your posts feels inadequate. And they go into debt trying to keep up with you. And they post their own carefully curated lies. And the cycle continues. Everyone is faking it. Everyone is drowning. And everyone thinks they're the only one. There's a term for this in psychology. It's called pluralistic ignorance. It's when everyone in a group privately rejects a norm, but they continue to follow it because they think everyone else accepts it. Nobody actually thinks you need to spend $1,000 on a handbag to be worthy of respect, but everyone acts like they do because they think everyone else believes it. Nobody actually thinks your worth as a person is measured by the number of countries you've visited, or the restaurants you've eaten at, or the brands you wear. But everyone performs as if they do, because the performance has become the only language we know how to speak. The system relies on your silence. It relies on your shame. It relies on you never talking honestly about money, about debt, about the gap between the life you project and the life you actually live. Because the moment you start talking, the moment you break the silence, the illusion starts to crack. If your friend admitted that the Bali trip was funded by credit card debt, you might not envy them anymore. You might feel sorry for them. Or worse, from the system's perspective, you might realize you don't need to go to Bali at all. You might realize that the destination isn't what you actually want. What you want is relief from the pressure. And the relief doesn't come from buying a plane ticket. It comes from stepping out of the race entirely. So how do you escape? How do you step out of a system that's been engineered over 90 years to keep you trapped? The answer isn't simple, and it's not easy, but it starts with one word: honesty. Radical, uncomfortable, social suicide honesty. You have to be willing to be the person who says out loud, "I can't afford that. I'm in debt. I'm struggling. I'm not going to pretend anymore. This feels impossible because we've been trained to believe that admitting financial struggle is admitting failure, but it's not. Failure is spending the next 30 years paying interest on a life you didn't even enjoy. Failure is working a job you hate to pay for things you don't need to impress people you don't like. Failure is getting to the end of your life and realizing you spent it performing for an audience that wasn't even paying attention. The second step is to unfollow, literally and figuratively. Unfollow the accounts that make you feel inadequate. Unfollow the influencers who are selling you a fantasy funded by credit card debt and sponsorship deals. Unfollow the friends who only post their highlight reels. This isn't about bitterness or judgment. It's about protecting your mind. You can't make good decisions about your life when you're constantly marinating in other people's propaganda. And make no mistake, that's what it is. Propaganda. A carefully constructed narrative designed to make you feel like you're not enough so that you'll buy something to fill the gap. The third step is to rebuild your relationship with money. Not as a tool for identity, not as a way to prove your worth, but as a simple, practical resource. Money is a tool for meeting your needs and funding your actual values. That's it. It's not a measure of your character. It's not a report card on your life. The man with a $10 million net worth isn't 10 times better than the man with $1 million. He's just a man with more money. Strip away the mythology. Strip away the performance. Ask yourself what you actually need to live a good life. Not a good-looking life. A good life. The answer is probably simpler and cheaper than you think. The fourth step is the hardest. You have to be willing to disappoint people. You have to be willing to say no to weddings you can't afford, to trips you can't take, to dinners and drinks and social obligations that are slowly bleeding you dry. You have to be willing to let people think less of you. Some of them will. Some of them will judge you. Some of them will drift away, and that's okay. Because the people who judge you for being honest about your limitations aren't your friends. They're your audience. And you don't need an audience. You need a life. Here's the truth they don't want you to know. The truth that the entire system is built to obscure. You don't have to play. You were never supposed to win this game, because it's not a game. It's a machine designed to extract wealth from your labor and transfer it upward. The house always wins. The only winning move is to stop playing. Pay off your debt. Live below your means. Build a life based on what you actually value, not what you're supposed to value. Find meaning in relationships, in work that matters, in experiences that don't require a credit card and a photo op. This won't make you popular. It won't make you enviable. It will make you free. Your friends are faking it. The photos are lies. The champagne is debt. The smiles are rehearsed. And somewhere, in a quiet moment they'll never post about, they're sitting in their car, or lying awake at 3 a.m, wondering how they got here and how they'll ever get out. You can be the one who gets out. You can be the one who tells the truth. You can be the one who breaks the cycle. It starts now. It starts with you. It starts with one honest sentence. I can't afford this. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm choosing a different life. The machine will keep running without you. Let it. You were never meant to be fuel.